I would love to invite you to really stand and feel yourself rooted in the earth. Imagine your roots going down deep and feel that support. Notice your breath. Are you breathing? And as you're reaching down into the earth, feeling that support and those roots lifting up and imagining that string at the top of your head, sensing the sky and all that is above you. Just thinking about how you stretch up and you stretch down. Taking another breath and really just feeling that alignment. Rooted in the earth, lifting up your head. And then we're going to think about our left and our right. And think about the widening of our person. You can even think about widening your stance a little. And just recognizing that not only do you go down and above, you go right and left. And just really feeling that and connecting to the person next to you. We are part of a community. Just kind of softly with your peripheral, you can just notice the people around you to your left and to your right and feeling that stance, taking up space and feeling that connection to each other. Noticing your breath. And so just like up and down and left and right, we want to feel the back of our body. You can even place a hand on your back in a way or another. Just notice that you have this whole back of your body. And with that comes everything that you brought up until this moment, the experiences you have, the lessons you've learned. Noticing your breath. And also just recognizing you can even imagine kind of like a cone going out backwards, and recognizing that your ancestors are there with you, supporting you, supporting us. And just like there is the past, there's also the future. And so just reaching with your consciousness forward into the future, imagining the possibilities, having vision, the planning and the prepping, the thinking about. Just really feel that front part of your body and the space that you occupy energetically. And we're too far in our past and we're not like when we're stuck in our past, or we're too far in the future and we're not grounded, that's when we get pulled, or if we're being pulled left or right. We want to be centered, right? And so now we're going to go inwards into the heart and just connect to your commitments, to what's important to you, to what your values are. When we're able to center there, staying open in all directions, but really like centering into our hearts and our values. From there, we can make decisions and decide the actions we want to take. And in this moment, I would love to invite you to connect to gratitude. Gratitude for showing up for yourself and your community today, for the others who have shown up today, and the potential and the possibility here in this space right now. And give yourself a last breath. Breathe in and out. Thank you so much for doing that with me. You may have a seat.
Thank you so much. That's helpful. I know even sometimes I feel like when I have a choice about how I do my work, I'm still programmed to do it in a way that's self-injurious, I'll tell you. And this work especially, I think. I just wanted to say a couple words before we introduce our first panelists. And the way it's going to work, where they're each going to have 15 minutes just to present the things that are on the top of their heart, on the top of their mind, and how it engages, how it connects with the heat crisis that we're all faced with. Then we're going to take a short break. We're going to circle up and have a conversation facilitated by Diana Lopez, Southwest Workers Union, to keep us grounded, keep us connected. We want to pull a thread, you know. And once we start pulling, sometimes everything can kind of get scattered. But we want to stay focused to really think about in relationship to extreme heat, in our response to that. What are some strategies that we can put into practice? What are the things that we can get done today, tomorrow? What can we get done in 6 months? Where do we need to be in a year from now? When I started working, thinking about this issue, or I'll say in the last couple of years, one of the things that I've run into is the full impact of this on people's lives, right? And the lives that we've lost. We mentioned Albert Garcia earlier because he's such a kind of like a test case, right? I mean, he was a neighbor of ours. He lived down the street from us, and he stayed underneath the highway off-ramp. In Winter Storm Uri, he'd been unhoused. We worked actually actively deceleration, with Yanaguana Herbolarios, also with District 5, with folks from the cities, homeless outreach teams. There was a bunch of people outside advocating for this one person. And it took us over a year, literally, to get them placed in a group home. They left alleging abuse in that home. A caregiver who pulled a knife on one of the residents, and he ended up back down the street from us. He already lost his feet. He was there for less than a month before he died underneath the off-ramp, and I measured that spot, his camp. I have a little ambient air gauge, and I measured it regularly. It was 114 and 115 degrees. When you turn on KSAT at night and they tell you it's 105 in San Antonio, there are parts of the city where it is 10 degrees hotter than that, okay? That's called urban heat island, and it means people are not hit equally by the heat. I want to turn it over, and I do want to say, like, in the accounting, and one other thing, I know we have a friend from Metro Health. They work really hard on their accounting on who's being injured, but the people that are dying, we have no record of, basically, because the medical examiner told me they don't feel like our emergency network is robust enough in their collection of data that she feels confident to assign, oh, that was either heat caused or inspired by like secondary condition heat. So what I found out recently was there was 28 heat deaths logged by the state. I don't know where the medical examiner is, and it's not getting through to Metro Health. And until we know who's dying, how they're dying, why they're dying, we can't respond. And this is just a first meeting, right? Because we want to talk about the people whose lives are being lost. Lourdes Rios can speak to other cases, other neighbors who are no longer with us. They may not be out on the street. You may not see them. They may be in their homes or in their casitas, and they're scared to turn on their air conditioner because the prices surge, at CPS or what we're buying off the market. So I'm going to get out. I'm going to turn it over. We're going to have our conversation. These three people, I cannot speak highly enough of them. There's a reason we brought these individuals here, and I hope you can engage with them, listen to them, speak with them. That's what our time is for tonight. And everybody who's here with the city or the utility or whatever, they're here in good faith too, right? There are structural issues we need to address. It's not the individuals, it's these networks, right, of relationships that have to be repaired in the same way we have to attend to one another. So first, I want to introduce actually Adelita. Okay. I think Adelita is speaking first. She's with the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments. She teaches nursing at the UT Health Science Center, San Antonio. Has other affiliations. I'll let her introduce those. Following her will be Rose Jones, a medical anthropologist from Dallas, and now is launching off her own is it a nonprofit or consultants dedicated to interrupting the violence of the intentional violence that's become through policy what we're experiencing. And then Lourdes will speak last. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming today. Can everybody hear? No? No? Go louder. Louder. Good. How about now? That better? Okay. Um, Again, thank you. My name is Adelita Cantu. I am an associate professor at UT Health San Antonio School of Nursing, and my expertise is in public health. I teach population health nursing to nursing students and health policy to graduate students. And I've been a nurse for a long period of time, always in public health. And I think I'm going to bring to the conversation today what we call social determinants of health. Those structures in our society that have more of an impact on our health than whether I get a pill or whether I get medication or the care I get at the bedside. Because we manage our health in the community where we live, work, and play and pray. And in that community right now, one of the big factors that we're all facing is the intense heat that is happening more frequently, that is happening sooner in the year, before even till we get the hot part of the summer. And from my perspective, and what I'm talking to nursing students about, is that intense heat, is a social determinant of health. It is impacting our health and our health care, not only for ourselves and our families. Um, and I'll talk a little bit about the dangers of heat, just to be sure that everybody is on the same page with the dangers of heat. But I want to touch upon something Greg had said about the inequities in San Antonio and certainly in other major urban areas, the inequities that exist because of how San Antonio was built, the legacy of redlining. And that is still something that San Antonio is trying to overcome. And one of the things that is really, one of the things that I've heard from, now slow down. Okay, slow down. One of the things that I heard from talk that Dr. Drennan, Christine Drennan from Trinity University, our local expert on redlining, said, is that the health disparities that we have in San Antonio right now will only be fixed if we build it differently, because the health disparities resulted from the way we built San Antonio. So therefore, we need to think about our structures if we want to do something about health disparities. Again, let me go to heat and the intense heat that we experience. The intense heat is exposing, much more impactful, exposing the fissures that we have in inequities in San Antonio. Because of the way our housing stock was built, more people are going to experience it, the intense heat, to a greater degree than someone who lives in a house that is well insulated, that has an HVAC system, etc. So, intense heat is one of those things that just exposes those existing inequities that we have in San Antonio. And the fact that people in burdened communities experience the heat means that they're going to have more health impacts from that intense heat that is they're experiencing, right? So the one thing that, again, we talked and I trained the nursing students, talked about, is being sure that people understand how dangerous heat is. And some people, a lot of people just think if I continue drinking water and I hydrate, that I'll be fine. But the problem is that everything we do and every movement we make, we release energy. So even just walking up and down our block, getting out of the sofa, it's all going to release energy. So our body has to always work to cool us down in circumstances that are ideal. Now, when you put intense heat on that, not only are we producing energy by just moving, but our body's having to cool off in a situation and environment that is intensely hot. So we've got all this heat being produced. And our body is pretty good about the mechanisms in which it cools down. You want to sweat because sweat cools your body. So you want that to happen. However, many times it can't keep up with the increasing temperature or heat index. So you're even more at risk for heat, what we call heat exposure. And you start feeling the headaches, the nausea, the dizziness that comes with it. And it's a quick trajectory to what we call heat stroke, where this could be a life-threatening condition. And just by drinking water is not sufficient. Is not sufficient. So, and I'm going to talk now about what I do as a nurse is talking to people about recognizing those signs and recognizing the signs in your family or the workers or any of you that are outdoor workers are so at risk. People that are unhoused, people that are outdoors, workers, construction workers, roofers. So drinking water certainly is good, keeping hydrated. But when someone is feeling that I'm heat exhaustion, going to heat stroke, the issue is cooling down the body as quickly as possible, which means putting them in ice water, getting ice, and putting it on parts of the body that have circulation that's near the skin. So that skin cools, that the circulation cools down here, and then that travels throughout your body. And that's your cheeks, right behind your neck, the bottom of your feet, if you can think about that, but the bottom of your feet, your palms are areas where you want to put that ice and that cool, which will circulate throughout the body. And that's really, really important is to cool down that body temperature or what we call the core body temperature. Because when you have those hot days, your core temperature is increasing. And the more it's increasing, the more likely you will be to suffer the signs and symptoms of heat exhaustion and going into heat stroke if you cannot cool your body down quickly enough. And getting this message out, I know Office of Emergency Preparedness is here. Your whole Beat the Heat campaign is getting people to understand the signs and symptoms so they can take care of themselves and their families. And how do you manage that? How do you manage that in the area in which you live? The areas you work, live, and play, because heat and intense heat is a social determinant of health. Then the other thing I'll say about San Antonio, we know that we have disparities in chronic diseases, right? That's nothing new. Everybody probably knows about diabetes, that San Antonio is twice the national average. So about 14-15% of our population experiences diabetes. Now, going back to what Greg was saying in terms of documenting the deaths that are a result of heat exhaustion, heat stroke, one of the things too that we have to be mindful of is these chronic diseases will be exacerbated by intense heat. And so an individual may go into the emergency room or actually die of what's considered a diabetic crisis, but that crisis is being brought on because of the intense heat. Another example of that is we know when it's really hot, it's a clear day, we always have a particular issue with ground level ozone. In fact, the EPA, we're in non-attainment of ground level ozone. So on those days when we have the ozone and the ground level ozone being so dangerous, that can exacerbate cardiovascular disease. Someone who already has cardiovascular disease goes out, ground level ozone is going to exacerbate that. And that might lead to a death. So it may not be documented as caused by heat, but in fact, it is a result of being exacerbated by the heat. Same thing with asthma. And we have a very, very significant issue, particularly with our African American population and children with asthma, which could be exacerbated by ground level ozone, which is caused by the intense heat. Slow. So, just to highlight what Greg was saying, in San Antonio, we have a lot of inequities. We know we have health disparities. Those health disparities can be made much more significant in an environment that's very, very hot and very much heat. And then the other thing I want to leave with is just being careful, being aware. And when we say keep hydrated, it doesn't mean drinking alcohol. It doesn't mean drinking soda. We're talking about water, clear liquids, and that's so important in terms of keeping that hydration level. But also how we in the community can take care of each other by recognizing those signs and symptoms and knowing how to care for that. Particularly if, like, when I work in an environment or in communities that are very vulnerable, and if we live in those communities as well, how we take care of our neighbors. We were talking before about being aware of our neighbors. And I think this, and with the summer coming up, knowing how to protect ourselves and our neighbors is so critical. Okay, I'm going to go to...
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, primarily because the work that's being done in your community is near and dear to my heart. If we're going to make a change, it's really going to be with community-led initiatives. Louder. Sorry. Nobody's ever said that to me before.
Go into it. You got a big room.
Okay. Is this good now? Okay. So I'm really delighted to be here. Drove in from Dallas this morning. I had lunch. I had the opportunity to meet several of you, and I was not only inspired but humbled by the work that you're doing. It's, from what I've seen, just really top-notch. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this effort. So let me tell you a little bit about what I do and why I'm doing it. I came to environmental health very late in the game. I have a doctorate in medical anthropology, and I spent more than 20 years in academic medicine, primarily working with infectious disease, HIV/AIDS, and pediatric trauma, particularly drowning and motor vehicle collisions. And late in the game, I discovered environmental health, climate change. I was recruited by an urban forestry group in Dallas that had been around for 40 years. They were working on tree canopy, trying to reduce heat with the urban heat island, etc. And they brought me on board because they wanted to create an umbrella, a foundation for all of their urban forestry programs with a public health component. So there I went, not knowing much about it. And what happened last summer was life-changing for me. What happened last summer that did not make the media, but that is critical in so many ways to our lives and where we're going, is I literally watched extreme heat transition from an invisible public health crisis into a full-blown humanitarian issue. And it was, again, I've spent 30 years working within academic community medicine, and HIV, I was there for the early days. And I have not seen during that time anything as concerning as what I'm seeing now. And when I say invisible public health crisis, the reason for that is the data that we have for the way in which heat impacts the body is not new. We've known about this. There's solid empirical peer-reviewed publications for more than 30 years, right? This isn't like all of a sudden this happened. So we've known about it, but we have not been teaching providers about it. We have not been educating the community. It's not part of screening. It's not part of outreach. What happened last summer forced us in many ways to pay attention. And the way it forced us to do it was in my opinion, it transitioned into something that's almost inhumane. I'll give you an example. From a more benign perspective, my husband is an employment attorney. He specializes in unions. He represents people who work in unions and lose their jobs. Slow down, thank you. And through his work last summer, I became aware of the situation. Some of you may know the story of when the LA writers went on strike. They began picketing. And when they picketed, the next day, the second day that they picketed, they went back to picket, and the tree canopy where they were walking had been destroyed by Universal Studios. Eventually, Universal Studios was fined, I think, $350. But that was a very acute message. What happened was, and I'll tell you how it manifested in Texas, that was a clear sign that heat was becoming a political weapon. It was part of the employment crisis. From there, it got worse. So what I began seeing, looking around, once I had that recognition, we saw what happened with workers. House Bill 2127. Abbott signed it in July. It went into effect in September 1. And by the way, Florida just signed a similar legislation last week. And what that did, so imagine, here we are struggling. How do we protect citizens from this extreme heat? What Texas did, while the rest of the nation was trying to figure out strategy, was literally take away heat protection and safety standards that were in place. And who did this affect? Well, it mostly affected construction workers, but just for the record, all workers. You're working in restaurants, you're working in a food truck, you're affected. And moreover, it particularly affected Black and brown people. This is an equity issue. And I'll add one more fact. Texas has the highest incidence on record and nationally for heat-related worker death. And what do? We take away mandatory water breaks. By the way, we're only talking 10-minute water breaks every 4 hours. We take away access to shade. That's a human right. That's a violation of human rights. The other thing that happened in Texas was 2/3 of the prisons in Texas are not air conditioned. There are 13 states that do not have air conditioning in their facilities. Unconscionable. Air conditioner, as you heard, is no longer a luxury item. It is the question of life and death. And for context, the state of Texas requires animal facilities to have a minimum of 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you know what the cells look like throughout the state of Texas? The stories I heard, what I saw was unfathomable. If it's, as Greg mentioned, if it's 110 outside, guess what it looks like in a cell with no air conditioning and no ventilation. We couldn't establish an empirical basis for how hot it was getting because the state is reporting, the facilities themselves report that data. Okay, that's not objective science, right? But what the families tell us and what we saw with the numbers of mortality and morbidity, clearly there's a problem. So what we all talked about in the media, that we were breaking temperature records all last summer. We were breaking more than that. There were human lives. And I've only got 3 minutes. 2 more things I'll point out. The unhomed. I won't belabor it, but they are the first to die. They are at a risk that we calculate to be 200 to 300% higher for dying from extreme heat. And then I will say what happened on the border is another humanitarian issue. One brave medic stepped up and showed a report. He showed an email that said they were being told to deny water to those crossing the border. That's a death sentence. That's a human rights issue. And by the way, he stepped up to do that. And meanwhile, the humanitarian groups that lay out water along the border to save lives, they went mysteriously missing. So what I share with you, and my time is up, is that in addition to the health issues, we've got a serious human rights issue. We need to call it what it is. So that's what most of my work is dedicated toward. I quit my job in September so I can work full time on this, and I've never felt happier.
Hello, my name is Lotus Rios. I run a mutual aid pantry on the south side in the Harlandale district, and my work is, I run the pantry. We offer to our community and unhoused um, clothing, food, resources as we can get them, and we offer it all free. I also run another one out of Hash Vegan Eats, and in there it's a harm reduction, and we kind of just meet people where they're at with no boundaries. You know, we don't take any kind of information. Um, I'm here to speak because I know that Albert, he touched. It was a lot of. We have a lot of people that we're losing here in San Antonio, housed and unhoused, uh, just because of lack of resources and people getting into our communities. I've walked into elderly people's homes and they don't have functioning, they don't have the windows, they don't have doors that keep stuff, inside. I see a lot of horrific things. I know I'm being, but it is. You walk in and you're seeing an 86-year-old, just trying to keep it at. I mean, I'm sweating when I'm in there. And then not only that, they have a limitation of food. There's not enough. And then, then we have these people like, well, there's resources, but they're not easily accessible. None of this. And to sustain, you know, Albert shouldn't have died. He shouldn't have died. People like Albert shouldn't have died. There should be more people raising their voices to this. I'm grateful to be around so many wonderful people. Our unhoused also get they're not allowed to go to a lot of these places. Our unhoused, the cooling centers. We don't have a lot of cooling centers that are just completely open. We have a lot of just walls being put up all the time for any of this access to. And they're like, well, they can just go. They just need to get a ride and whatever. But if you're medical complications, I have a lot of diabetics. I have people who are on dialysis. I have people who have high blood pressure, and because of the heat, they're not making it. I mean, I've lost people to dialysis, and then during the winter, we lost people because there was no access. There was nobody to come. I'm only speaking for the South Side. I know that it's a whole, but I know that we need to see these people. We need to get into the communities. We need to do the walks that we used to do. My grandmother used to go and check people. Outside. I'm being told to go slow. And check on people, because that's what you did. You checked on your neighbor. You made sure they had something. So I'm just kind of here to talk about, I had this one woman named Ms. Vasquez. She lives in our area. Well, she lived in our area, and it ended up being where, because she was afraid of turning on lights or electricity, she got severely dehydrated. She was on dialysis. They did have, she did. And we eventually had workers come in, but it was already at the point where it was just too late. We can't save these. But you see it, there's always in these pockets of this community. So we really do need help. As a mutual aid person, we need help, because a lot of us also are in the ground level. We need someone to help us educate people about heat illnesses. We need more hands-on so that we can save more lives this year. I started the pantry with Jovita Hidar pantry system in 2020 during the quarantine. And since then, even when we were in the quarantine, I remember walking into houses where people were left with no workers to come to visit them for, they had their health worker. They were gone. And in that, there were people, no air conditioners, or no, they couldn't reach these things. There were people who were running out of food. There was just so much. And as we're coming out of the quarantine and people think things are getting better, they're not. These cracks in our community and the lack of trying to, help in the areas to get these resources out and education. We need more. I mean, we just need more. And that's what I'm here for, is to gather whatever we can do and then speak about the human element, because it's not easy watching these people pass away from something that they shouldn't have to. They just shouldn't. Albert shouldn't have died under that bridge. Someone should have stepped up. That was somebody's brother. That was somebody's son. And every day we lose this. And in the heat, we lose so many people, even in the cold. And these are our neighbors. These are people who went to church with us. These were, and because we don't talk and oh, well, we have to create policy and we have to do all this red tape mumbo jumbo. I get it. Things got to get paid, but we're losing people in the process. And that's what I'm here for. I don't want to lose any more people. I don't want to lose Mr. Bubbles. I don't want to lose Ms. Vasquez and Mr. Garcia. We need to do something. We need to get the education out there, talk about the other elements. Like, yes, if you have an underlying medical condition, they don't know that. Almost everyone I've talked to doesn't know that. They're just now kind of, well, what do? We don't know exactly what to do. So we need more people. And I'm sorry, I get a little emotional. It's for me, the work is going to be, I know, a long process. It's going to be long, and I hope that everybody jumps in, because we do need an all hands on deck. But I mean, if you want to help, also there's mutual aid places. Look them up on Sacred. Look them up. We have connectors. You can see it all. Ours is the Harlandale Sunshine Pantry. If not just us, just check on your neighbor. Hey, what they're doing, whatever the city's doing. Check on people. Go out there. Go to the houses that nobody goes by. They just walk right. They're like, well, that lady, she screams a lot. Go in. Ask her. Say, hey, do you have enough water? Do you have enough food? Do you know where to get this? Because I bet they don't. So, I mean, I thank you for this. I thank you for hearing the stories that we talked about, and if anything, we can save at least one. Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us, and we're going to take a couple of minutes. I just want to kind of kind of reconvene pull some threads together, right? There are multiple things happening, and we need to be able to kind of hit each in turn, and at the same time. One is we need to eliminate the overheating of the climate that's ongoing. We need to interrupt the heat at the source through a just energy transition. And some folks that I've known, I worked for 5 years as an organizer in that field, there's 10 people that go to those CPS meetings, every month, right? And we know those 10 people. We need to also rejuvenate and our lands, right? And there's people working to address shade, right, with planting and food forests and gardens, and we need radical transformation of the urban landscape through our relationship with plants, right? And there's people doing that work and amazing work that deserve support, right? But they're oftentimes in that world, right? And then there's also people who are doing mutual aid and direct action and community level support for the unhoused, trying to interrupt the camp, the sweeps and all of that, and they need our support, and they're oftentimes kind of in that camp. And so our hope is, one, we can learn how to think holistically. I mean, even the action at Valero related to the sales of jet fuel that's powering literally genocide right now of the Palestinian people. So there's all these conversations we need to all be swept up in together and support those who are stepping forward, like Lotus here, right, in her networks in the Harlandale Sunshine Pantry. Adelita deserves and needs our support when she goes out and she's working within city committees and working with medical students, and of course Rose Jones as she steps up and brings her message out publicly. All of this, and we're all doing things, and it's not that we're reinventing anything here tonight, But the hope that I see in all of this is in our being here together, right? Being together is the only response. So we're going to take a few minutes break. Please stop in. The people that came out with these tables, they're doing this work too. Any one of them could probably be up being a panelist right now and delivering messages to inspire each of us, right? So please take a minute, visit them, see what people are doing. Then we're going to pull these chairs into a circle. I'm going to invite Diana Lopez from Southwest Workers Union to kind of facilitate conversation. We're going to unpack these, what these panelists brought. This is like our starting place, and we're going to unpack this conversation, but we want to hear from each of you, like, where do we take this next? What are things that maybe we haven't thought of? What levers do we need to pull, or how do we need to come together at the next meeting? So thank you all for being here. We're touched, we're humbled that so many people, we know people care about our city, they care about their neighbors, their family, their children, of course. That's it for me. We're gonna take a quick break. Applausos for our panelists, Joy, Seba, and stop by, there's some interesting artwork happening back here. You can design your own collage. We just put a bunch of like really awesome magazines and photos, so stop in over there also. Thank you.
All right. Should I speak in English or Spanish? In English? All right, in English. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening. Where is my brain? I just had that coffee in my... join us in the circle so that we could hear you. If I could get the music a little bit lower. Muchas gracias, DJ. I'm Diana Lopez. I work with an organization called Southwest Workers Union, and our government name is Centro por la Justicia. And you might know us by either one of those. I do environmental justice work here, climate work, overall lover of nature and the outdoors, and really glad to be here. I'm also a member of Deceleration's advisory team and a longtime supporter of Deceleration, and Greg and everybody around this circle. And I'm really glad there's some spaces here. Yeah, come join us. Sometimes the reason why we do a circle is that it's important for everybody to see and hear our voice. And another shout out to the translation team, who are going to be extra coordinating this space. Does the Decel team wanna throw out anything
to set up? Yeah, I would just say, like, to start kind of like with thoughts that came up through the panelists. Yeah, just
raise your hand if you've ever experienced 100 and plus weather. Raise your hand if you've ever been without AC. Raise your hand if you've ever felt dehydrated. Raise your hand if it really frustrates you that we continue to not change our practices as a city. All right. You see all these hands? Whoop! You see all these hands around us? We're all in this together, right? Wherever we come from, wherever we live, regionally, internationally, we're facing this together. And part of being in the circle and being in this space is ensuring that we come up with solutions, analyzing and shared spaces and practices so that we could support each other. Because sometimes we don't get that from our local governments, right? And so that's why we have to create these spaces, these resilience centers, these community centers, these mutual aid spaces. It's all connected, y'all. We're all connected. And when we have these conversations and share our voices, we call that analyzing. Some people call it chisme. Let's call it climate chisme, right? But this is important so that we can learn what each of us is going through and kind of really connect each other to things. So I'm going to open up the circle now. And we're a little bit challenging, but if people want to take a seat here to create a stack or be loud enough where you're sitting, so that way you could share. And it's like basically anything that came to your mind, anything, your aha moment during the speakers. They spoke in depth and had a lot of knowledge to share. And now we want to hear from you. Comments, questions, concerns, your own experiences. Tell us about the weatherization at your house. I want to see that. I want to know that. Because there's people around the circle who can make those connections and next steps. Anybody want to kick it off? ¿Alguien quiere empezar? Oh, yay! Come on, thank you so much for starting it. Muchas gracias.
Sí, nada más que yo pues hablo español.
Sí, sí.
Yo nomás
Un poco más.
¿Cómo puedo decir? La señora que habló sobre lo que está pasando en nuestras comunidades con la tala de árboles. Yo me siento triste ahorita porque donde yo nací en México, Torreón, Coahuila, hay una metalúrgica que es donde hacen metal, ¿verdad? Esa corporación destruyó mi comunidad donde yo nací. Mi hermana me habló para preguntarme que si yo sabía de algún título de la casa donde yo crecí. Le dije que no, porque cuando nosotros emigramos para acá, no supimos más, la casa ahí quedó. Y le dije yo que por qué, que porque la corporación metalúrgica está destruyendo nuestros cerros. Yo no sé si ustedes saben de lo que es un cerro, no montaña, porque para mí una montaña es de tierra, no, este es un cerro de piedra. Ahí nací yo, ahí crecí. Entonces yo le dije a mi hermana, ¿cómo? Dijo, manita, todo nuestro cerro, nuestra comunidad ha sido movida de ahí. Compraron toda una colonia y parte de otra. Las grandes corporaciones están destruyendo nuestra tierra. Ahorita que escuché de la tala de árboles me sentí identificada con esto que está pasando en mi tierra, que es Torreón, Coahuila. La colonia Vicente Guerrero está desaparecida. Ya no existe esa colonia, nomás una parte. El cerro donde estaba mi casita fue desaparecida del planeta, como quien dice.
I'm from Torreón, Coahuila. Torreón, Coahuila, and the neighborhood that I'm from, there's a metal plating. ¿Cómo se dice? De metal.
Se llama metalúrgica. Sí.
Metalúrgica, which is like a metal factory. And one of the things that they're experiencing is loss of homes and loss of land around this, as well as the collective translating cierro, hills, mountains are disappearing because of the actions of this corporation.
Ahí en ese cerro, cuando yo era niña, tendría algunos 8 o 9 años, a mí me gustaba brincar. Yo subía a esa montaña, brincaba al otro lado de la montaña y miraba todo eso verde. O sea, era un mundo hermoso. Entonces, ahora que lo desaparecieron, ¿a dónde fueron a dar los animales silvestres que vivían allí?
When I was a little girl, I used to climb up the hill in the mountain, and I used to be able to see all the greenery and land below. And now that those practices are happening, it's all disappearing. And I wonder, where do the animals, where do the wildlife go when something like that happens?
Entonces, por eso digo, esto es parte, no nomás es San Antonio, no nomás es Texas, no nomás California, es mundial. Y no debemos dejarnos, ya debemos levantar la voz, defender nuestra tierra, que es de la que comemos, que es de la que vivimos y de la que respiramos. Muchas gracias.
And this issue is not just San Antonio, but it's everywhere around the world, and we should defend ourselves, and we should not stop fighting.
Does someone want to talk to that idea of deforestation or rights of nature? Or,
Right. So the topic is deforestation, rights of nature, land loss.
Somebody who works with.
Come right up. Woo woo!
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk that long. 2
Yeah.
minutes. Come on. Okay. So I'm part of the group that's been fighting to save the trees at Brackenridge Park, and we're talking about 100-year-old trees. Our city will not stop this destruction, this planned destruction of the trees. But they also include chasing migratory birds away. If you go by there now, they're shooting explosives at the birds and people and blanks over everybody and banging 2x4s to disturb the birds, but right now it's more about disturbing the public. These trees are 100-year-old trees. The walls in the river were built to protect the trees, and now the wall that's broken, they want to cut the trees down to fix the wall. So what's going on with our city is that we are at moderate non-attainment, our pollution, our air quality. It's the same thing. But we are a heat island, and what helps with mitigating heat island effect is trees, vegetation. And so our park, Brackenridge Park, is one of the older parks in the city. And what helps protect that river are the trees that are along there, and they want to cut them all down. And a lot of people don't see it in the news because it's all being withheld, misrepresented. The recent article in the Express News said that trees were old and decaying. We're talking about healthy oak trees that are a keystone species. So that is what I'm doing. I work to educate people on obviously the trees, the importance of our trees, but also migratory birds that come to nest here. We share them with other countries, Mexico, Central, South America. And, okay, I'm talking too loud, sorry. And so these birds include 4 that are listed as species of greatest conservation need in the state's Wildlife Action Plan. If we don't start taking care of our wildlife, our birds that need conservation, we will not have any, we will not have any, 10 years down the road. So a lot of the stuff that's going on, particularly it's actually citywide that they want to get rid of these egrets and herons that have nested here probably 50 years at Elmendorf, over a decade at Brackenridge and throughout the city. So it's really an unrealistic thing that our city thinks they can displace these birds on such a big scale. But the problem also is that when you disturb nature on such a big scale is you push them into neighborhoods, which is what happened last year. They went into Alamo Heights. But now if you looked at the paper, they were telling people to make noise to scare them. But these are instructions that people don't know. Are these birds needing conservation, or do they already have babies in the nest? Do they have eggs in the nest? You're going to do something that's going to harm a nest or the future of a species. So my name is Alicia Garlock. I have Friends of the Migratory Birds in San Antonio on Facebook. We have Save Brackenridge Park on Facebook and Protect Yanawana Grandfather Trees. And actually, Brackenridge Yanawana Coalition is just something we're starting, but we work to educate the public on climate issues, the trees that we need, obviously, to breathe, and then migratory birds. And if you want to learn more, please talk to me, look it up. But I think, who wants to talk next? Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much. And they have a table over here where they'll have a lot more information. Cool. So, pásale pa acá. So, if I will not be translating, so if you need translation into English, visit our friends over there and they will be helping you. If you need a specific translation, because I think it's important for people to speak in the language that they feel most comfortable in. And I'm being reminded to speak slowly but loudly.
Buenas tardes. 2 minutos. Okay.
Antes de que empiece, is anyone monolingual speaker that does not speak Spanish? Please grab interpretation equipment.
They work really well. You should try it.
Yes. If you do not understand, because we want to make sure it's equitable with language as well, right? That not only the English speakers are heard, but also the Spanish speakers. I don't know if we have other languages represented. I don't think so, but language justice is important for that reason too. And if you're not bilingual, we don't want you to miss out on this information. nada más estaba diciendo que es importante la justicia de idioma.
Ya puede empezar.
Ah, toma.
Oh, ok, vamos a esperar.
While we're waiting, so when we finish this dialogue, we're going to invite our panelists back. We want to hear them speak back to. So this is a time for folks who are here. You know, like I said, Rose Jones came down from Dallas, right? She's familiar with some issues, but deeper, you know, in North Texas. Adelita and Lotus, of course, know their territories. But as we think about things that we can begin to work together to implement and prioritize and demand change. We need to be demanding change up here from elected leadership, but also the things that they're not bringing to us, right? They're not coming to save us. We need to create networks here in the grassroots and drive the change up, okay? So we're going to be having a multi-directional, multilingual conversation, and then stick around in about 20 minutes, 20 minutes, we'll have our panelists speak back to us and to kind of wrap up the evening.
Bueno, mi nombre es Araceli Herrera y yo organizo a Trabajadoras del Hogar. Quiero seguir con el tema de los pájaros en el zoo, que están quitando los árboles. Estoy indignada porque no solo los pájaros, las ardillas, las víboras, los insectos, cientos de cosas, y están rompiendo el ciclo de vida de ese lugar. Por eso tenemos el calor. Yo puse ahí que los que gobiernan San Antonio son unos ignorantes y unos tarados que deben de regresar a la escuela para comprender que los ciclos de vida, si se rompen, nos afectan al ser humano porque estamos enlazados totalmente. Entonces yo he insultado mucho a los que gobiernan a San Antonio por eso que están haciendo en el zoológico, para tener dinero, para atraer agentes inversionistas, para hacer lujoso el lugar. ¡Qué idiotas! Bueno, ahora voy a otro tema. Estoy totalmente con eso, que hay que salvar el zoo, los árboles, los pájaros. Recuerden que esos desgraciados de los ejércitos quitaron a los pobres patos de ahí de la Universidad del Lago, o el Lady of the Lake, y quitaron los patos de otro lugar. ¿Y qué ganaron? No pasó nada. Los pobres patos los dañaron. Yo creo que los mataron, porque ustedes creen que nunca regresaron, y yo digo que los mataron porque los agarraron en la noche. Dijo una del concilio, Shirley, dijo, no se preocupe, nosotros les vamos a avisar para que ya no vengan. Oh, sí, les va a mandar correo electrónico. ¡Qué idiotez! Bueno, estoy indignadísima por eso, pero yo quiero decirles que yo voy a estar en un evento de la Esperanza. Ya tengo el flyer. Voy a enseñar a hacer productos de limpieza que no son tóxicos. Es algo que yo siempre les digo y les ando enseñando. Miren, en los hogares también las amas de casa somos las primeras contaminadoras del planeta, usando indiscriminadamente cloro, el mentado maestro limpio, los aromatizantes. Eso es destructivo totalmente para el ambiente y para nuestra salud. La Universidad de UTSA y una universidad de Houston están haciendo un estudio con las trabajadoras del hogar, y fíjense que no es la alimentación, son todos los químicos que tenemos ahí abajo del baño y en la cocina y en el garage, los que nos están matando. Gracias. Pasen a aquella mesa.
Perfecto, that was perfect. Muchas gracias. Allá están en la mesa. ¿Dónde están? Esperanza, where are y'all at? All right, there we are. So if y'all want more information about some upcoming events, go there. And then we have Debbie. How many more minutes do we have in the circle?
We're good. We have like 10.
Perfect. All right, come on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Ponce with Public Citizen. A lot of you have seen my little red line of inequity, but I'm going to talk about it again today because it's on deceleration, and social media needs to see it, and I'm going to slow down. So I'm going to ask you to picture the city of San Antonio. Imagine the map. Most of us have been here a while. And I want you to take a red line and draw it across the Highway 90 that goes directly through the middle of our city. When I started working in climate justice, one of the things I first noticed is the cooling centers. They were telling me, it happened right after the freeze, the winter freeze, where everybody's house got turned off. And I said, okay, well, this is important information, right? So I go to our city's website and I pull up public libraries, because those are listed as a place that you can go to be cool. Sorry, slower again. Those are listed as places that you can go to be cool. And they're also places that you can go to be warm in a cold environment. And just the visual of it took my breath away, because we have over 30 libraries. They're all numbered. And only 6 are below that red line. And 6 for an entire half of our population. There's 2 like right around the west side, close to Highway 90. But I thought to myself, if there were to be a freeze today, who's going to live and who's going to die? That was pretty clear in that visual. And I've complained about it in public places when we go and have forums. And they say, well, there's community centers. So I pull up community centers, and it's much the same way. And so a lot of these things stem from our city, starting from the affluent side of town and going down every time they have this great idea to implement something. So like, for instance, the last implementation, a little bit slower and talk. Okay. The last amazing install is the bike trails. And I was so excited about the bike trails because I have been biking since I was in high school. I lost that ability for a while, for a number of years. And so to me, when I saw the bike trails, it was exciting. But all of the funding came and started on the other side of town. And now that it's come down south, there's no more money. So if you pull these things up that I'm talking to you about, you can see for yourself on Google. And so that's what I wanted to show, those 3 examples. We need to talk about the inequity in our city, and we need to start asking for all of these great climate justice ideas coming to start on the south or start down and go up, because the other side of town will make sure there's enough money for them. Thank you.
And then up next we have Saba.
Hi, everyone. I just want to remind you, I think we have about 7 minutes if you come up to speak loud and slowly for our interpretation. I wanted to take just 2 minutes of this speaker time to talk about some practical things that we've been mentioning in our conversations with deceleration. Some of those things are making sure that we have frozen water bottles in our freezers throughout the hot summer. In case, your AC is not working, you can put that frozen water bottle on those places that we learned today, right? Like the back of our neck or on our feet. And then also having a cooler, like one of those small coolers in our cars in case we do get stuck in traffic, which pretty much happens every day in San Antonio. And we can have frozen water bottles there if we see somebody on the street that is struggling. And then if you're having a heat stroke in the car because your AC is not working, that's a life-saving thing as well. And it's really easy to do. Or if you have children as well, right? Like, it's super important for us to think about those really simple things that we can do to have in our homes and in our vehicles. I'm a bus rider, and if you have a car, we need to be more mindful of really taking on those friends that are bus riders that try to be conscious about not polluting more, right? It's a choice that I can make because I don't have children or other, but carpooling, right? Even if you and your friend do have a car, right? Less cars on the road, less traffic, less all of this, right? So thinking about how we can do ride shares, share our vehicles, give each other rides. Remind me if I'm forgetting any, if y'all are thinking of any on the team. Another one would be if you have a garden, right? Sharing those things that are growing out of your garden, sharing it with your neighbors. One thing that somebody mentioned in our meeting is having maybe a captain for your street, for your neighborhood, knocking on your neighbors' doors, having that uncomfortable conversation and saying, hey, my name is Exie, and I'm your neighbor, and just know that I'm here if you ever need something, especially our older neighbors, especially anyone with disabilities, right? And when we do have those really, really hot days, making sure that we go and we check on them, right? And so having those captains or having these conversations at the neighborhood meetings can be life-saving as well. Gracias.
Gracias. So we have a few more minutes if somebody wants to share.
So, hello everyone. I actually am here today representing Councilwoman Terry Castillo's office, and thank you. District 5 is one of the most interesting areas of San Antonio. We have some of the poorest zip codes. We have some of the highest levels of diabetes in the city. We have the worst levels of asthma in the city. There's so many social determinants of health. We have that conversation a lot in our office. And she's currently the chair of the Community Health Committee at the moment. So that's a conversation that I know that the councilwoman really tries to bring up every single time she's in a committee. Oh, sorry. I know it's a conversation that councilwoman continues to bring up. And it's unfortunate that she's only one on a board of 10 or a council of 10, technically 11. And so one of the other things that we highly recommend is talking and having those real conversations with your council people, right? Because they typically need someone to tell them what is happening in the community. I really appreciate working for District 5 because they make that extra effort to go out in the communities and go and ask people what is it that they need from us as a city government. And I primarily work with constituent services, so I'm answering phone calls, I'm talking to people who are directly impacted, who say they can't turn on ACs, who say that they can't afford food, can't afford rent, can't afford clothing, can't find a job, have their fellow or a formerly incarcerated person, and they can't have access to services. So it is very deeply embedded in this history of redlining and inequities. And so just making sure to constantly bring up that conversation of how is this equitable? How are we really reaching the people who wouldn't normally listen to this message? How are we impacting the community? How are we making sure that they are involved every step of the process? So all that to say is currently Councilwoman is championing the metal recycling CCR that is talking about metal polluters and how the recycling of these precious metals is releasing pollution and toxins in our air. So please be on the lookout for those things. She's again the chair of the Public Health Committee. So if you guys have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to our office.
Thank you so much. And as we kind of close out, we'll have space for one more. But before we kind of close it out with somebody, this extreme heat survival guide is now in Spanish as well. It's a printout, a deceleration printout from last year. If you go online, They are also available online and in color. But if you haven't picked up, please do so. Everybody here has some sort of power, right? Whether you're a teacher, from an organization, from a household, right? There are things that could happen at various levels. And so please take some of these as well as continue to create and build practices. And we will close it out with Matilde.
And I just want to shout out Ana for putting together the zine. Gracias, Ana.
Hello, my name is Matilde Torres, and so I am also defending the trees and the birds and everything, the ecology over at Yanaguana Brackenridge Park. So one of the things that like the other Spanish speakers were talking about was about, you know, how it affects everything, right? The ecology and so forth, and how it affects us as well, right? And so that's been one of my observations, I guess, connecting more, you know, with Mother Earth and, you know, just with the elements, right? And so one of the things that you know, it's true, you know, we see it later on, 10 years or, you know, 5 years later, that somehow it affects, right? So the heat, it's just not, you know, it's everywhere. It's happening everywhere. We see a lot of trees or a lot of development going on through the city, right? And especially here in San Antonio, or even in the South Side, where we see just bulldozing these trees like they're nothing, right? And so, and that's where I kind of like wonder, I'm like, how are they getting away with this, right? There's a tree ordinance and there's all of these things that they're supposed to be following, but somehow they're still allowing these developers to continue doing what they're doing, right? The destruction within our city, and like she mentioned, you know, the wildlife as well, right? So that's one of the things that we are witnessing now about, you know, the birds, and they all have a purpose. They all have a purpose in life. Just like we have a purpose in life, the birds have a purpose in life. You know, it's part of the ecology, right? You mess the ecology, there's an imbalance, right, in the planet. One of the things that I like to share is, you know, if we think about, you know, 2-3 years ago, back in 2019, when the lungs of the earth were on fire, right? If we think about that, how did that affect everyone? It was COVID. Because that is the first thing that COVID attacked, was the lungs, right? And so I began to understand that that's what it is, you know, and that is a message that was coming, you know, about what happened, right, with the lungs of the earth, right? So not only it happens even with the wildlife, the animals, that we just say, oh, you know, we'll just remove them, but they're very much part of the ecology as well. You know, removing the buffalo from this land, you know, was removing everything from our ancestors, from our indigenous people. It was everything in that animal: food, shelter, everything, tools that they made out of with that animal. And so I learned even through that, just being part of a buffalo harvest and just standing in front of this huge animal, what they had taken away from the land, you know. And for me, it woke, you know, something in me that there is something that we're missing, and that is, you know, understanding more about these wrong decisions that these corporates make throughout, you know, throughout this country or worldwide, however, you know. So we need to stand up. We need to come together more to these meetings. And, you know, thank you, Greg Carmen, and thank you all who organized this, you know, because we do need to have more of these conversations. You know, it's a wake-up call for us and for Mother Earth. So thank you again.
Gracias, everybody, for participating in our circle, and I will pass it back to Greg to close us out for this event.
Yeah, and we're going to hear from our panelists in just a minute. I want to highlight a couple of comments online about water access, and why we're putting information out into communities. I think the comment was, it's silly to put flyers on doorknobs of people with no AC because they're already the experts. But I think what the intention is to organize, mobilize, and inform of the things that people can do. Because I think one of the things when we think about privilege is oftentimes it's access to information and knowing how like these policy networks and these channels work, right? And we need to share that information as well. So one point, I will say, a conversation I had with the CEO of SAM Ministries 2 weeks ago. So I said earlier at the opening of this this conversation that we don't know who is dying, how they're dying, and until we know who is dying, how they're dying from heat, how we can respond in a way that interrupts that, so that we don't lose more people, so we can reduce that, we can repair that. The best information we have about specifically the unhoused community is maintained by SAM Ministries. Until we have that kind of level of data from other sources, they have an annual document that they produce that lists every member of the unhoused community that they're aware of who's dying on the street. And I think the number last year shot up tremendously. They said part of that was funding, that they could had more better outreach, but a part of that, she said, was the heat, unprecedented heat in San Antonio, and what that meant in her opinion, right? Without doing the ambient temperature checks, body core temperature checks as soon as possible when those folks are found. In her opinion, up to half of those could have been, at least in part, due to the heat, and probably 20%, in her opinion, were likely primarily the heat. So that's 60 people or more in 1 year, just among those unhoused. We're not talking about the community that Lotus and others are serving that are in their homes without AC or with poorly resourced, right? So I just want to dial us back to that reality. And so we're in here in this space, not because other people don't know what's happening in their worlds, but because we have access to this information about how we can begin to change it. And by networking, by distributing that information, and by meeting together, we can collectively exert power on the other 9 council members who are not necessarily, or 8 or whatever it may be, who are not necessarily there ready to respond. Because even though we're talking about grassroots, collective, kind of mutual aid response, it does not excuse the billionaires and the governments that are profiting and destroying the planet, driving us off the cliff. It does not excuse any of that, and we have to push on that side too. So it's an injustice, right? That pressure is pushed down upon us, but that's where we are. I want to offer both 3 of our panelists a couple of minutes just to reflect. They've had this time to reflect and hear from the people in the community here that have come out for this conversation, and maybe what they want to offer back as in terms of thinking about next steps or whatever is top of mind. We'll start with Dr. Cantu.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the conversation. I learned so much. The one thing I want to end up, because I was hearing a lot, and one thing comes to my mind that I read is that we all are in this storm of climate change. We're all experiencing it. The thing is that in this storm, we don't all have the same boat. And some people have a yacht to be able to weather the storm of climate change. Some people have a boat, a medium-sized boat to weather the storm. But some people do have floaties. And that is, I think, what I'm hearing tonight, and just continuing to understand the circumstances in which those people that have floaties, because it really does have an impact on their health, not only public health, but their personal health as well. So that's all I have to say today.
Thank you.
for your first meeting, this is an amazing turnout. It's just so impressive. Here's what I heard and may be useful. I heard several of the community members talk about trees and birds and the eco niche. And
Yeah, right.
Oh, louder. Okay. And that's a really important point to connect with public health. We have a term that's currently it was used about 10 years ago. It's emerging, but I think it needs to be part of the discourse. We call it One Health. And One Health recognizes what your community members were sharing with you. If something affects the animals, it affects us as animals, it affects the eco niche, all of it, the soil. And I think it's really important that we used to have that perspective, that worldview. Indigenous cultures had it, but we've lost it. In medicine especially, in biomedical, we continue to separate, for example, the brain, mental issues from physical issues. It's all connected. And so I really appreciated hearing your community share that from their perspective, because I'd like to see that more used in public health as well. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Listening to everybody, and I didn't get everybody's story, but even with the council, that I think that's what we also need to do. We need to show up at these meetings. It's and we have to address exactly our animals and everything, and save our trees and save our water. There's just so many things. I mean, I could just piggyback on, but going back to I think we should get more. We've tried. I know that there's a lot of other people who are not like Terry, and very wonderful person, but we need. I don't know exactly how I know a lot of people have gone and made a lot of noise, but we need to be able to get into there. I am hoping, to maybe by this we can start showing like, hey, look, don't be afraid to come out. Don't be afraid to say things. Don't be afraid to get loud and go to these meetings, go to the council meetings, go. But, I wish there were more like Terry. I really do, because we fall into a gap. We fall into a horrible gap. And the last council meeting we did, when Albert passed, nobody paid attention. So I think that's where, I'm just listening. I'm sorry. This is just my emotion with it. Nobody listened to us. Nobody, the conversations that they were trying to have, it fell on deaf ears, and nobody paid. Like, they were having side conversations and everything. So I really do appreciate you being here. This is a big thing to be a part of. And just unifying as a whole, we could do so much and save those lives and then give the education that our people need. We need to be re-educated, and there's so many of us that don't have that. So thank you all for coming. This is just such an amazing thing to see so many like-minded people and people who want the change. Just keep on showing up, please. We need this. We need this more than ever. No more lives should be lost the way we've lost them in the past years. We can be the change. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Gracias. We're going to close it out then and just ask that you sign or fill out the sign-in sheet. We are going to have a second, hopefully a third meeting where we want to bring those community members that don't have access to this. So I'm so grateful for all of us that were here, but we need help. This was mostly a team of 3 and 4, and then, more supporting hands that did this, that made this happen. But we need your help to get those people here, the monolingual community, the disabled community, the our elders, right? Bringing them here so they can equip themselves with this knowledge. So please make sure you do that before you leave and visit any of the tables that are left. Maybe create arts and crafts. We're going to hang out for about another hour. So we'll be here, and let me see, am I forgetting anything?
Just email for updates.
Yes, please fill out your email so we can give you updates. And if you have interpretation equipment, please don't go home with it. Please give it back. Thank you so much. And we're going to put some music on. All right. Gracias. Forgetting something. I'm going to remember.